Welcome back to the show where we run you through all the Dolphins news you need to know about. Later in the show, we run you through a specific group in free agency that the Dolphins might want to target, and after that, we run you through the fan Q&A where we answer fans' questions. But let's start with this first news story. That's a very interesting one. A new team has officially entered the quarterback game, and that is the LA Chargers. They have announced, this comes from Pro Football Rumors, that Phillip Rivers will not be returning to the Chargers. So just in case you guys don't know, here's the draft order. The Dolphins pick at 5th in the draft at 5, and the Chargers pick at 6. They're right behind the Dolphins. Why is this important? Now, unless the Chargers go out and get a veteran, which I think they will do, I don't think they're going to draft anybody. But if they don't, they're going to be major players in the draft. And this makes it even more stressful because everybody's going to be wanting that pick at 3 for the Detroit Lions. Because we all expect the Cincinnati Bengals to pick Joe Burrow. We all expect the Washington Redskins to pick Chase Young. 2 pretty much locks in the draft, and then things get crazy when you get to Detroit. Detroit's probably in the market for someone like an Isaiah Simmons or an Okudah, the quarterback from Ohio State. They can afford to trade down and get some of those players and gather assets. It's a pretty dang good deal for Detroit if you think about it. They don't need a quarterback. They feel like they have a pretty good team when they have a healthy quarterback and healthy running back. To trade down and get more assets, I think that's a no-brainer deal for them. So if you want a quarterback, you're gonna have to trade up to 3, because if the Chargers don't take one in free agency, they're gonna trade up because they're at 6. They know they can't wait to get one because we're in front of them. So it's just another team that entered the game. I think, me personally, my personal opinion on this, I think the Chargers are gonna address this in free agency because there are so many good quarterbacks in free agency. Whether that's Tom Brady, or it's Taysom Hill or Teddy Bridgewater, or someone like that. I don't think it's going to be through the draft, but if it is, it's big news for the Dolphins because it's just another official. No more speculation. The Chargers are definitely going to push for a quarterback now. Let's get into this next news story. This comes from Pro Football Rumors. Dolphins unlikely to make a strong push for Tom Brady. Now we're not going to speculate on this because we did a lot of that last week on the Tom Brady situation. We broke it down what that could mean for the worst. So we're just going to read you the news and then move on. Okay. Again, this comes from Pro Football Rumors. Dolphins unlikely to make a strong push for Tom Brady. Will Tom Brady join up with the Dolphins this offseason? Owner Stephen Ross says that's not likely to happen. Stephen Ross said, quote, "We're a team that's building, and I don't know why he'd really want to come to the Dolphins. He's been one of the fiercest competitors there is, and we're at the stage with the Dolphins trying to really build a team for the future." That's more or less what you would expect to hear from an owner who doesn't want to deal with tampering accusations. But Barry Jackson of the Miami Herald hears that Ross was telling the truth. He's not expecting Brady to walk through the door, and the Dolphins are unlikely to make a strong push for him. For the last couple of weeks, there have been increasing buzz about the future Hall of Famer taking his talents to South Beach. The theory goes something like this. Brady is close to Bruce Beal, a business partner of Stephen Ross. Beal holds an option to buy the Dolphins from Ross, and could in turn sell a minority stake in the team to Brady. Brady potentially could boost the value of the club in his twilight years by playing in Miami, but Ross79 says he plans to be the Dolphins owner for the rest of his life. Whew. Alright, so we pretty much talked about this last week, but I feel like the headline is important, and it's weird that I haven't heard any news stories that said, yeah, the Dolphins are definitely not going off to Tom Brady. This kind of stuff is like, is the door open? Like, Dolphins unlikely. Doesn't mean they're not going to do it. It's very weird. And again, if this was a different time in the Dolphins, a different time and a place for the Dolphins, like if this was Joe Philbin, if this was Adam Gase, if this was the Stephen Ross that's like, yeah, we're going to build this through free agency, and get as many players as we can through free agency, this would absolutely happen. But from everything we've seen from the organization, especially over the last year, we've turned a new leaf. So I don't expect this to happen. I do believe Stephen Ross when he says we're trying to build for the future, and that's the smart thing to do. I think it would be wrong for the Dolphins to go down that route. And we broke that down last week, why I think that. I just don't think it benefits this team. I think it benefits this team to go after a young quarterback and stick with Ryan Fitzpatrick in the building. I think this team is really the best coaching staff we've had here in the Stephen Ross era. I think you can make an argument for that. I think this organization is being ran the right way right now. And to kind of go back on that philosophy right now would be a mistake, in my opinion. I'm all for, and I know that some people aren't, but I'm all for the Tua train. I'm all on the Tua train. I'm all on getting one of those two in the draft, because I think those are the two guys that are worth investing a top 5 pick in. When you talk about Joe Burrow, Tua Tagovailoa. So I'm all in on that. I don't want this thing to happen, the Tom Brady situation to happen. And if it did happen, it would make one heck of a off-season headline. I can tell you that right now. Because that would just turn everything on its head, especially for what the Dolphins are trying to do. I mean, you would pretty much see all of that free agency money probably get spent in 1 year if that happened, which would be insane. So let's go to this next news story. Dolphins rumors on the draft on Xavier Howard and on some receivers. So we have a couple of things to discuss here. Again, this comes from Pro Football Rumors. The Dolphins have lots of holes to fill this offseason, but they're more or less set at wide receiver, a league source tells Barry Jackson of the Miami Herald. Currently, the Dolphins have Devontae Parker, Preston Williams, Allen Hurns, Jakeem Grant, Isaiah Ford, and Albert Wilson on their wide receiver depth chart. Though likely ask Wilson to restructure his deal, Jackson writes there's others in the mix too, including Gary Jennings, who didn't really get a chance to show his stuff in Miami thanks to a season-ending injury, and former Eagles wideout Matt Collins. Given their depth at the position, Jackson doesn't see the Dolphins using a day 1 or day 2 pick on receiver. Some have wondered about the team's need at wide receiver after Williams suffered an ACL tear in November. However, Williams says he'll be good to go for the 2020 season, giving him an opportunity to build off his strong 8-game showing. Before his early exit, Williams caught 32 passes for 428 yards and 3 touchdowns. Grant also will be ready to roll for OTAs, so they'll have plenty of options from which to choose. So talking about the receivers right there, I think this is a good news that the Dolphins aren't going to go after anything in terms of receivers. We've talked about that receivers are, and it's one of the first positional groups we previewed was receivers because there's really nothing to talk about. The Dolphins have what they need at receiver. They have a lot of depth. They have a lot of versatility at that position. So they don't need to, they didn't even mention Isaiah Ford, who really is a true blue slot receiver that this team hasn't had in a long time. So all of those things are good, and I'm happy with this news that the Dolphins feel like they have what they need at receiver. All right, let's continue on with this news story. Now we're going into the cornerback and some news on Xavier Howard. Again, this comes from Pro Football Rumors. Cornerback, meanwhile, is a high priority. Jackson hears that the Dolphins are intent on addressing the position in free agency or the first 2 days of the draft. So again, in case I wasn't clear on that, the Dolphins are intent at the cornerback position to address it in free agency or the first 2 days of the draft. The Dolphins still plan to move forward with Xavier Howard, but they're looking to find him a suitable partner that can set up if Howard is suspended for his late December arrest. Rising star NFL sophomore Nick Needham could be a part of that solution, but he's still green. The Dolphins believe they can use their ample cap room and draft stockpile to fortify and improve at corner. This is really interesting news. So the Dolphins find the quarterback position a high priority. Now, before we get into some other things, I want to start with this. The philosophy of where he comes from, they prioritize defensive backs over defensive linemen. Bill Belichick has always done that, especially recently. And I think that has to do with how the NFL, what direction they've gone in. He always has prioritized, or not always, but at least in the last 6-7 years, that he's prioritized defensive backs over defensive linemen. And that's where Brian Flores comes from. So this doesn't surprise me that the Dolphins would look at their defensive back room and say, okay, this is how we built this in New England. This is how we're going to do this in Miami. So it fits that. Which is really interesting. I'm not in disagreement with that at all, because we've seen in New England, you talk about the depth that the Patriots have and some of the players that they've picked, like Obi Milanofalu, I've completely butchered his name, who was a very high draft pick in Oakland. They picked him up. They pick a bunch of stragglers up. Malcolm Butler is one of the more famous ones. They've always stockpiled at the defensive back room and made that a priority. So this doesn't surprise me. Am I okay with this? Yes. Unless there's a high, super talented defensive lineman in some of those slots, and the Dolphins decide to pick, it's all dependent on who's there in the draft. You know what I'm saying? I'm okay with them. I'm more okay with them addressing on day 2. And here's why. And it's because I feel like, and again, the whole argument that, here's what I'll say. I take back what I said about day 2. I would rather them address this in free agency than I would the draft, in my opinion. Because now, if you talk about day 3 of the draft, or day 2 in the later stages of day 2, that's fine as well. But I don't think this should be addressed in the first round, in my opinion. And in free agency, I would rather that be the place to address it, in my opinion. If you're going to address it. Because the whole argument, like even this argument, this article was like, oh, they feel like Nick Needham doesn't have enough experience. Well, what the heck does the draft fix about that? It's still going to be a first-year corner. That doesn't make any sense. So we'll see what happens. Again, I feel like, in free agency, the priorities should be offensive linemen and defensive linemen. And I would say secondary has got to be a very distant third, in my opinion. So it does muddy the waters a little bit. But again, we've seen it work in New England, and I'm not completely opposed to this, because I feel like if you have a great secondary in this league, and especially how this defense is called, with a lot of cover one defenses, and we didn't do a lot of zero-man blitzes this off season, or this past season, because maybe we felt that the secondary wasn't up to par. The way this defense is ran, I'm okay with them making defensive back a priority. I will say that. All right, moving on to this next news story. This comes from Pro Football Rumors. Dolphins have signed wide receiver Ricardo Lewis to an extension. The Dolphins have re-signed wide receiver Ricardo Lewis to a 1-year extension to take him through the 2020 season. A source tells Tom Pelissero of NFL.com. Lewis missed the last 2 seasons due to a neck injury, but he won't turn 26 until March, and the Dolphins believe in his talent. Lewis entered the league as a 4th-round pick of the Browns back in 2016. As a rookie, he hauled in 8 grabs for 205 yards. In 2017, he took another step forward with 27 catches for 357 yards. So, yeah, this is an interesting move. Ricardo Lewis is more of a speedster type of receiver, more of a deep threat. Maybe they want to add a little bit more of that into the group, and we'll see how that stuff, how this shakes out through training camp and preseason. See if he can make it through. He is talented, he's a very fast receiver, and we'll see if he can prove himself. This last news story. I think this is the last news story. Yeah, this is the last news story before we get into the positional group that we'll be previewing. Chargers against Charges. It sounds like I said Chargers. Charges, again, this comes from Pro Football Rumors, against Dolphins Xavier Howard dropped. The domestic battery charge against Dolphins cornerback Xavier Howard has been dropped. As of ESPN.com's Cameron Wolf writes, Howard will not face jail time for the late December incident, but NFL discipline remains possible. So, again, just because these charges have been dropped, if the NFL finds anything incriminating, I guess you could say, they will still suspend him. So, this does not mean he will not be suspended, unfortunately. Now, I have no idea. I have not done enough research on this whole situation. I don't know what Xavier Howard exactly did. If he did it, what the heck's going on in the situation. So, I don't know. As a fan, I'm hoping he doesn't get suspended, because that's all I know right now. So, that might sound a little ignorant to say that, because I don't know the situation. If he did do this, then he needs to be punished for it, of course. So, I don't know if he did or not, though. So, I don't know enough about the situation in terms of what he did. But yeah, hopefully he didn't do anything, and hopefully he gets to play all 16 games this upcoming season. So let's get into free agency, ladies and gentlemen. We went through all the news you need to know about. This week's positional group that we're going to be previewing is linebacker. We're going to be doing outside and inside linebackers on today's episode, so strap in for that. And again, not everybody on this list. Sorry, just in case so you guys understand and you don't kill me in the comment section. Everything on this list, I'm going to argue for or against. So if you hear a name, don't just automatically react to comment. At least listen to what I'm saying, because I might argue against it. Also, when I was making this list of players that the Dolphins should or should not target, I wanted the criteria for this week. I wanted someone who could set the edge in the run game, who could rush the passer, and who could also cover if needed, because we run a multiple front. So they could be asked to do some coverage things at times. So they all three of those things have to meet the criteria. The coverage part is a little bit lax. I'm not looking for like Derek Brooks level coverage from an outside linebacker. I'm looking for good skills for a 3-4 outside linebacker. So again, to give you the criteria, you have to be really good in the run game, you have to be a good pass rusher, and you have to have some coverage skills. I'll say that. Okay? Also, any 4-3 linebackers, in terms of outside linebackers, I'm talking about, outside linebackers in a 4-3 defense. They will not be on this list because they don't fit our defense, okay? We need someone who can take on the tackle and push him back into the backfield, all right? So, like, just to list some names. Sean Lee, not on this list because of that. He's a 4-3 inside linebacker. He's played outside linebacker the last 2 years. There's some other names on this list that let's see here. Other 4-3 defensive guys. AJ Klein, who's a good player, but he doesn't fit the system. There's other players. I don't want to take, there's other ones that are on this list. Devondre Campbell's another one that I think people are going to bring up. He's one of the best 4-3 linebackers in the league right now, but he's a 4-3 defensive. And he's a 4-3 type of linebacker. He's not he can't rush the passer. He's a coverage linebacker, either in a nickel defense or in a 4-3 defense. So, like, some of those bigger names aren't on this list for that reason. So let's start with the first one, who we've already talked about in the past. So we're going to kind of skip by this guy, but I still put him on my list because he's a really good player. Kyle Van Noy. And again, all of these players are going to be free agents. Again, this is inside-outside linebackers. And this is my list for some of the guys who have fit the criteria that I have presented 2 seconds ago. All right, so the first one is Kyle Van Noy. He's 28 years old. He's one of the best linebackers in the NFL, one of the most underrated players in the NFL. He had a career year last year. I think he had 3 forced fumbles, had 3 defensive touchdowns. He's more of a disruptor, like a Jadeveon Clowney. His numbers, and again, he had his best year last year. If you watched him, you have to actually watch this player to understand how good he is. The stats don't tell the entire story. He had 6.5 sacks and 56 tackles, 3 forced fumbles. Especially us as Dolphins fans, over the years playing this guy, he is a disruptor. He's a disruptor in the run game. He's a disruptor in the passing game. He's a versatile player who can play inside, outside linebacker, be great in the run game on both positions. He can cover at a high level. He's a good pass rusher. He fits every single criteria that I've listed. He's 28 years old, and again, he's perfect. He's 6'3", 250. He is perfect for what the Dolphins need to be better in the run game and the pass game. So, yeah, he's one of my favorite players in free agency. I hope the Dolphins do pick him up. So, yes, I'm going to give this one a yes and a pass, okay? Kyle Van Noy is definitely a pass. This next one is an interesting one, to say the least. Corey Littleton. Okay, now, this is an interesting one. This guy is a tackle machine. He had 134 tackles, 3.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and 2 interceptions. His first year in the league, okay? Not his first year in the league. I would say his third year in the league. He had a really good year. He had 125 tackles, 13 pass defense, 3 interceptions, 90 total tackles. This guy is a machine, okay? He's one of the best young inside linebackers in the NFL. He fits a 3-4 or a 4-3 defense. He's physical enough in a 3-4 to play that position, and he has the coverage ability to be a high-level 4-3 linebacker as well. He's smart. He's a great open field tackler, as the stats show. He's good in pass rush situations, too. He had 3.5 sacks at middle linebacker. I'm going to give this one a pass. Now, you might be saying, well, you just said the 4-3 linebacker situation. I understand that. When you look at this roster, and I've said this in the past, especially for inside linebackers, we're pretty much set. We have Jerome Baker, we have Raekwon McMillan, who play inside at times. Sam McGuavin on the outside, who's done a pretty good job as well. I feel like, and I probably should have said this at the start, I like our linebacker core. It's really the outside edges that I think need to be addressed. The inside is pretty set. Now, Corey Littleton is a very good player, okay? He can play all 3 downs. He's a coverage linebacker, okay? And he's a good against the run. and he's a great open field tackler. Corey Littleton is one of the better middle linebackers in the NFL. So I'm going to give this a pass just because of that. Because I think he makes your defense better. If he's on your defense, he makes your defense better. So I'm going to give this one a pass. Now, is this necessarily a need? No. And that's the only reason I would say it's a no for me. The only reason I would say that is because he's not really... he's coming into a room that's already pretty well established, is what I should say. But he's such a good player, I'm going to give it a pass. Let's go to this next one. Jamie Collins. Okay. This is a very interesting one. Now, if you're not, obviously you're familiar with Jamie Collins if you're a Dolphins fan. He's had a lot of success in the New England defense. He's had a little success elsewhere, like when he was traded to the Cleveland Browns. He didn't have as much success as he did with New England, but he comes back to New England this past season, and he has a really good season. Jamie Collins had 81 tackles, 7 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, and 3 interceptions. So he fits all 3 criteria. He's a 3-4 outside and inside linebacker. He's played both positions at a high level. He's good against the run. I won't say he's great against the run. He's good against the run, and he's a good pass rusher. Not a great pass rusher, but a good pass rusher. So he fits all 3 of those, in my opinion. He's not better than Kyle Van Noy, but he's a good player. Now, here's what I'll say about this. I'm going to give this one a no, and this is why. He's 30 years old. He hasn't had a ton of success in other places. Plus, the reason he got jettisoned from New England to Cleveland is because he was asked to set the edge in his defense a good amount, and he didn't want to do that. So that's an issue, because will he do that with Brian Flores? I would say so. I mean, I'm sure he respects B-Flow. B-Flow coached him for a long time. I'm sure there's some respect there, but I'm gonna give this one a no because of those 2 things. He hasn't had a lot of success outside of New England, and the whole setting the edge thing is, if Bill's not in the room, will he? I don't know. I'm gonna say this is a no just because of that. He could be an issue in the locker room. Just in terms of effort, I guess. The other guys on this list, there's no doubt about their effort. They're all going to give 100% all the time. All right, this next one is pretty much, I would say he's one of the, more under the radar guys, is Marcus Golden. Okay, he's 28 years old. He's 6'3", 259. He had 10 sacks this past season and 72 tackles on a bad Giants team, okay? I've always liked Marcus Golden. His years in Arizona with Bruce Arians were awesome. He got after the quarterback. Not only did he have sack numbers, but he had pressure numbers as well. His years in Arizona with Bruce Arians, he had 12 sacks his last year with Bruce Arians. And he had 4 sacks his rookie year with Bruce Arians. After that, he only played. He missed the 2017 season. 2018, he was coming off, I think, an ACL tear, maybe. I could be wrong about that. So he didn't have that greatest season. He had 2.5 sacks. He comes back healthy with the Giants, and he had 10 sacks. Not to mention, in 2018, they switched schemes, so they were playing a 4-3, and he doesn't fit that scheme. And he's not a 4-3 down end. So that's another reason he had a down year. He goes back to a 3-4 defense. He has 10 sacks in New York. I think this is a perfect fit. He's great in the run game. He's great in the pass game. He's athletic enough to do some things in coverage. So he fits all 3 criteria. He's a bigger guy. He's more under the radar. I don't think this guy's going to cost anything. So, yeah, I'm going to pass this one. I'm going to pass Marcus Gold. He's one of my favorite players in free agency in terms of under the radar guys. And I think the Dolphins should absolutely take a look at him. And the more I think about it before we move on to the last 2, I probably shouldn't pass Corey Littleton. And here's why. I might go back. We're going to go back on Corey Littleton. I'm not going to pass him. He's a great player, but I feel like he's going to command a ton of money because he's such a good player. Does he make this defense better? Yes, but he commands a ton of money, and I feel like the 2 middle linebackers, or the 2 inside linebackers that we have now are good enough. So I'm going to go back on that and say I'm not going to pass Corey Littleton for those 2 reasons. So let's get to the last 2. The last 2 on this list are very good players that might command a ton of money, but this, the first time we've done previews for free agency, is the first time I'm okay with the Dolphins investing money in these 2 players because I think they're that good. Okay. This first one is lower than the last one, but he's still a very good player. Is Bud Dupree, okay? He had a career year this past season. He had 68 tackles, 11.5 sacks, and 4 forced fumbles. He was not only a force in the pass game, he was a force in the run game as well, with his 72 tackles, for God's sakes, as outside linebacker. Okay? That's almost middle linebacker. That's middle linebacker-ish numbers. Okay? So he's 26 years old. He's 6'4". He's 269. He sets the edge in the run game. He's really underrated in the run game, like super underrated. Anytime anybody ran towards him, it was night. It was you're going home. Okay. He's a great physical player. Okay, and he's great. He's improved a ton in the pass game. That's been the knock on him, is he hasn't lived up to his pass rush expectations. If you look at his pass numbers, 5.5 sacks in 2018, 6 sacks in 2017, 4.5 in 2016, and 4 in his rookie year in 2015. He's been more of a Jadeveon Clowney-esque player who has just been a disruptor. Just like we started with Kyle Van Noy. If you just watch Bud Dupree, he just disrupts an offensive game plan, and that's perfect for this defense. We need someone who's gonna literally be an issue in run blocking schemes. Like, we're gonna have to figure out a way to stop Bud Dupree this week. He does that for your defense, and he's a freak athlete. Okay, so he can do a lot of stuff in the pass game if you need to, and he's improved a great deal in the pass rush department as well. So I like Bud Dupree a lot, and I know some people are gonna point to maybe, he had T.J. Watt on his defense. He had Cameron Hayward on his defensive line. He had Stephon Tuitt, Hardgraves. He had good players on his defense, but before he did on the defensive line, he was always a disruptor. His sack numbers weren't always high, but he was always disrupting the opponent's team. The problem with Pittsburgh's defense in the past has been their secondary. Their secondary has just been awful. So Bud Dupree's always been a really good player, and he makes this defense significantly better if the Dolphins were to sign him. He's going to command a lot of money. He's coming off a career year with 11 sacks at 26 years old, and his athletic ability plus his ability in the run game, he's going to command a ton of money. So I'm okay with the Dolphins giving him what he wants. This is exactly what this Dolphins defense needs, is improvement on the defensive line. And he brings pass rush, he brings run stuff ability, he brings athleticism, he brings speed, he brings everything that we need on the defensive front. So I'm all in on Bud Dupree. So yes, he gets a pass for me. This last player, I would rank behind only Kyle Van Noy. That's how highly I think of Kyle Van Noy in the fit of his in his defense. He would be number 2, and number 3 would be Bud Dupree for me, and number 4 would probably be Marcus Golden on my list. So this is the number 2 player on my list, and he absolutely does get a pass. It's Shaquille Barrett. Shaquille Barrett had 58 tackles, 19.5 sacks, 6 forced fumbles, and an interception. So he fits all 3 criteria. He's really, really, really good at gets the run. That's what he did in Denver so well before he became the sack master, for God's sakes. He was a disruptor, like we've discussed with Kyle Van Noy and Bud Dupree. He's a disruptor. He just messes up your offensive game plan, and that's the thing he did best before he came to Tampa. He was a monster against the run, and he got a ton of pressures in the pass game. He didn't finish with sacks. If you look at his numbers before he went to Tampa Bay, 3 sacks, 4 sacks, 1.5, 5.5. He didn't get the sack numbers, but he's always been a disruptor. Okay, and he just happened to have an insane season in terms of sack numbers. So he fits all 3 criteria. He's 27 years old. He's 250, 6'2". He's a bigger guy. He sets the edge in the run game. Okay. He does everything you want him to do. He's perfect. The only reason he's 2 is when we talk about disruptors and versatility, I don't think he's as versatile or as disruptive as Kyle Van Noy. That's how highly I think of Kyle Van Noy. And we've only had one sample size of him being this dominant. When you talk about Shaquille Barrett, that's why he's 2. If we had more of a sample size of this, in terms of his sack numbers and his pass rush ability, then I would have him higher. But I still think Kyle Van Noy is a better player because he's done it for longer and on a more consistent basis. So that's why Kyle Van Noy is over Shaquille Barrett. But you talk about Kyle Van Noy, you talk about Shaquille Barrett, you talk about Bud Dupree. I would want all 3 of them if I could take them all 3, or at least 2 of them, because it would make this defense so much better. But that's my top 3. When you talk about inside, outside linebackers, Shaquille Barrett, Kyle Van Noy, and Bud Dupree are my 3 best at that position, and absolutely the Dolphins should actively try to get one of the 3. They're everything that we are looking for at that position, and I think it's pretty important to at least get one of these guys in free agency. And we've already had the report that the Dolphins are interested in Kyle Van Noy. So either one of those three, I think make us, all of us, very happy. And one thing I will say before we move on to the fan Q&A, the other thing that I really like about this group, my three group, is they're all young. Shaquille's 27, Kyle's 28, Bud's 26. They're all in their prime. So you're not getting a fat cat. You're not getting someone who isn't going to be hungry for it. You're getting someone who's in their prime, who still wants, still has aspirations. This isn't a 31, 32-year-old, 30-year-old. They're all in their mid to late 20s. So I think that's all positives as well. So you're going to have them for a while, and they're still really good players. Okay? That's my three. And again, the whole list, even Marcus Golden I would be happy with. I don't think he's as good as those three players. I don't think he's even in the same ballpark as those three players. I don't think he's as versatile as those three players. But he's still a good player, and I think you could get him for pretty cheap, and I still think he would make the defense better. I would be ecstatic if the Dolphins got Marcus Golden. So someone like him would be a welcomed addition. But yeah, those are my inside and outside linebackers. I don't think inside linebacker is as important. I even talked myself out of the Corey Littleton thing because of that, even though Corey Littleton is one of the best middle linebackers in the game right now. You look at what the Dolphins have there, it's like, okay, but it's already good. There's no need to invest there because it's already good. And I'm not going to give a percentage of the cap to someone that doesn't necessarily make the world of a difference, is my point. These guys make an insane difference. So, I mean, you talk about some of the issues that this team had when we went to three-man rushes, when we had teams backed up on the goal line and they would go play action and there would be nobody around them. Stuff like that, like little things like that in games, is where you need a Bud Dupree, a Shaquille Barrett, a Kyle Van Noy to make a play, to either get in their face, hit him in the backfield in the run game, sack him for a safety. Like, we didn't have that on our defense. We didn't have a playmaker up front. All three of those guys bring that to this defense to make, not only give us a special player, a Pro Bowl caliber player, but someone who can make one or two plays a game in those key moments to win us those games. So I think all three of those guys can do that, and that's why they're on my top three. So that's my outside-inside linebacker preview for free agency. Let me know what you guys think about that. I'm sure you guys have different lists and different opinions on that. But that's my list. So let's get into the fan Q&A, ladies and gentlemen, where we answer fans' questions. We have 15 questions today. That's pretty good, especially since I uploaded it late. And the channel's been doing good. It always does better in the off-season for some reason. Maybe because we've had such terrible seasons lately. I guess people just don't want to hear about it. But I'm glad that people are watching and listening at a consistent clip. And they always do in the off-season, like I said. I don't know, for whatever reason. Anyway, let's get into the fan Q&A, where we answer fans' questions, ladies and gentlemen. As I take a little sip here. Alright, this first question comes from Julian. He says, "Hey Skaggs, thank you for posting these videos." Oh, thank you for saying that. That means a lot. On that note, do you think the Dolphins should trade Albert Wilson or restructure his contract? I don't think they should get rid of Albert Wilson. I really don't. I think I like Albert Wilson a lot. I love his run after the catch ability. I think he's getting healthier. I think we saw that at the end of last season. And he becomes a problem for defenses, especially inside. If you put him inside with Preston and Devontae and how good we think they can be, that presents such a problem for defenses. So I think we should either restructure or just keep him on the contract that he has now, okay? In my opinion. So that's what I would do. I just think that presents so many issues, especially in a spread offense, that it's just too valuable to get rid of a player like that. This next question comes from Take Me Out. He says, "Scenario. Finn shit up for Burrow, give Brady a 1-year deal where Burrow sits and learns. Are you in?" Hey, man. This man's saying some things. The only reason I would say yes to this is because we get Joe Burrow. Has nothing to do with Tom Brady. In this scenario, we shit up for Burrow and give Brady a 1-year deal. I don't think that works because you have to build a team that can win now if you get Brady. So getting Burrow doesn't really fit that, and it doesn't really help him for the long term, especially depending on what free agents you sign. Maybe it works. Maybe you get a ton of young talent at free agency and in the draft, then it would work. But that's a big if. And I think you could probably, especially since it's Miami, it's Brady. I think you could probably do it. So yeah, I think it's the best of both worlds. You get Brady for a year and win, and hopefully you get a bunch of younger free agents. But you need to have younger players for at least 3 or 4 years on deals, and that's tough to kind of nail down. So I'm gonna say yes just because of Joe Burrow. And I don't know. I'm kind of in. I don't know what to think about that. You're kind of breaking my brain right now. I'm gonna have to say I'm a meh on that. I love Joe Burrow, but the whole Brady thing makes it complicated because of how you're trying to build the roster. It kind of contradicts the whole Joe Burrow move. But whenever Tom leaves, then Joe comes in. He has to come into a roster that is talented, and that's the thing about getting Joe now is you would do that because when you would send him behind Fitzpatrick, and then when he's ready, he would be coming into a young, talented roster. So I don't know. That's kind of a tough one. This next question comes from Tech Me Out again. He says, "What are your thoughts on Jacob Eason, the quarterback from Washington? I can see him moving up in the draft boards. I think there's a lot to like. No, I don't like him. I really don't like any of the quarterbacks past Joe Burrow or Tua Tagovailoa. The third guy that I like is Jordan Love, and that's just because of potential. Justin Herbert scares me. He just scares me. The whole comparisons to Tannehill, and I see a lot of Tannehill in him. And Chris Sims, people like that who have played the game, and I'm not talking about these sports. I'm not talking about like Stephen A. Smith or Skip Bayless. I'm talking about like people who break the game down at a high level. When they say the offense that he comes from Oregon isn't a pro style offense, and because of that, it's a one read offense, and him having to really be one of the guys that's going to take longer to develop, and one of the harder ones to develop makes me scared. Okay, I want someone who is a surefire guy, like a Tua, like a Joe, and Jordan Love is more talented than Justin Herbert. So if I'm going to take a flyer on someone who's going to be a developmental project, then I'm going to go with Jordan Love because he's more talented. So, yeah. And Eason, to me, he's a backup. That's what I see in Jacob Eason, in my opinion. This next question comes from Ray Gonzalez. He says, also, what are your thoughts on DeAndre Swift? I like him. I don't like him more than some of the other running backs in this draft. He's versatile. He's got a little bit of Kamara in him. But you talk about now. I'm pretty sure J.K. Dobbins is coming out, right? I could be wrong about that. I'm pretty sure he is. And then you got Jonathan Taylor. I like those guys better, but I think Swift would probably be my third guy in the draft. But I'd be totally fine if the Dolphins picked him. I think he's more of the new look running back, and he's versatile too. So yeah, I like him, especially in a spread offense with him coming out of the backfield. That could be an issue for defenses. This next question comes from Ethan. Ethan asks, in your opinion, which is more likely, Tua remains healthy for 5 seasons or Jordan Love develops into a franchise quarterback after one redshirt season? What is more likely? Tua remains healthy for 5 seasons. Listen, it's very rare that you get a quarterback that is like, you think about the quarterbacks that have happened to Brett Favre, okay, who went to Atlanta and it didn't end up, and then he even went to Green Bay and had to earn it there. You look at Steve Young, who had to sit behind Joe Montana for all those years. Patrick Mahomes is the most successful one that I can think of. That was a project coming out of the draft that really clicked after 1 year. My point is, it never happens, okay? There have never been someone you look at, okay, his game needs a lot of work, okay? But he has a strong arm, but he has the athletic ability to escape. He has the instincts to make defenders miss. But he can't play quarterback right now. That rarely ever works, okay? There's very few examples of that in NFL history. So that's the reason I look at someone like Jordan Love. It's like, dude, there's probably a 15% to 10% shot that this even works, as opposed to more like a 95 to 100 with Tua and Joe, in my opinion. So I'm gonna say Tua. The more likely one is Tua remaining healthy for 5 seasons. This next question comes from Ethan. Ethan says, "Hey Skaggs, what are your thoughts on the 4th and 15 rule used in the Pro Bowl in the NFL, wanting to go to a 17-game season? Keep up the great work." The 4th and 15. Okay, I thought you meant like paragraph section 4. I was like, dude, I don't know what you're talking about. You mean like the onside kick rule? The 4th and 15 thing. I've heard people argue against it because Sean Payton's like, oh, you don't want to get your quarterback, hurt on a 4th and 15. I like it. I like it better. I like the XFL taking extra points out of it. I like that. I've always wanted the NFL to switch to college rules in terms of overtime. I think all of those things make the pace of the game faster and it makes it more entertaining. So I like the 4th and 15 rule. I like the XFL's rule on extra points, and I like the college rules for overtime. So yeah, I'm all for it. In the 17-game season, if the players don't want it, then I'm with them. Then don't do it. If they do want it, then fine. But if they don't, then don't do it. It's not healthy. We already have them play. If they were like, all right, we're adding a 17. I wonder what the players would say here. We're adding 17 games, but there's no more Thursday night games. I wonder what they would say. I really do. There's no more Thursday night games. I wonder if they would do it. The only Thursday game that we will play is on Thanksgiving. And if they were like, I wonder what they would say to that. If I was the commissioner, I would present that to them, and they're like, fine. If that means we can not play, a few days after we just got, through playing a battle, then fine. If you look at the numbers for Thursday night games, usually the home team wins. Like, almost all of the time, and usually they're blowouts. So whether it's either the home team wins all the time or the other team just blows out the other team every single time. You rarely get a close game on Thursday night games. So I'm for it if depending on what the players think, but I wonder if that proposal was presented to them, what they would think. I don't know. This next question comes from Ray. Ray says, "Sup, Skaggs. What are the chances we trade up with Detroit or Washington, obviously to lock in Tua? And if so, what exactly would we have to give up?" Well, Cincinnati said to get the number 1 pick, you have to give them your first round this year and 2 future first round picks to get Joe Burrow. And if you're the Dolphins, you're like, well, we got 2 first round picks in the first round. Let's do it. Is that worth it? I don't know. I don't know. I would have to, I'm trying to answer these questions. That would take like a 20-minute segment to be like, okay, is this worth it? This is what happened, and this is the pros and cons to it. But that's the price for the first. I don't think the third, to move up from 5 to 3 is like, I don't know. It'll be like a third, maybe a third rounder. I don't think it's going to cost you a first round pick. It might cost you at the most a second round pick. So it won't cost you too much. This next question comes from Hunter. He says, "What are your expectations for next year?" I just want to see improvement. I want to see stars arise in this team. I want to see Pro Bowlers develop. That's what I want to see. Record doesn't really matter. I don't expect a specific record for this team this upcoming season, but I expect improvement from the players. I want more marquee names on this roster, and hopefully that emerges, because really that's all we expect from free agency and the draft. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I expect. This next question comes from Richard. Richard asks, "What about the Dolphins trading for running back Todd Gurley or Cardinals running back David Johnson?" This one's an interesting one. Todd Gurley, to my surprise, is only 25 years old. I was like, let me check. Let me see how old Todd Gurley is. And I looked it up because I heard about this, and I'm like, okay, he's only 25, which blows my mind. He's only 25 years old. He's had a ton of knee issues, but he's a special player. I'm going to say no to this because it's really... Now, if we're buying a draft pick and Todd Gurley, fine. But we're going to have to eat a pretty big salary for a running back. And in the draft, there's a lot of good ones. So that's why I would say no. But if you buy like a second-round pick for it, maybe it kind of evens out at the end of the day. I don't know. I'm okay either way. I would say I'm okay either way on that. Okay, let's see here. This next question comes from Logan. Logan asks, looking at our roster, we kind of mirror Kansas City. Kelsey is Gesicki. Hill is Grant. Sammy Watkins is Devontae Parker, but Devontae Parker is an upgrade. Don't you think we need our Mahomes, who is Tua? Oh man, that's kind of a stretch. I'm not gonna lie to you. I think Gesicki is more Jimmy Graham than he is Travis Kelce. I think Travis Kelce is a technical tight end with some athleticism, and like Jimmy Graham is all athleticism, and I think the same thing with Mike. He's getting better at route running, but I think Travis was just a better natural route runner than Gesicki was coming out of college. So there are differences there. Hill and Grant, they're completely different. Hill is a better receiver than Grant. Hill is a much better player than Grant. So that, to me, that doesn't compare. Obviously, Devontae Parker is significantly better than Sammy Watkins. But I see what you're saying. Here's what what I agree with what you're saying is this offense is talented. You're right. This is a top 10 passing offense last 2 months of the season and finished 12th overall in passing yards with this offensive line. So clearly there are people talented enough to throw to. So yeah, I agree with you on that. This next question comes from Beef and Kimchi, which is just a fantastic name. He says, "Hey Skaggs, do you think?" God, I just snorted. I'm sorry, guys. I apologize. He says, "Hey Skaggs, do you think if we were to get Tua now, would it benefit us because he's already injured and recovering? He might unexpectedly do well when he gets to the NFL. Then if we were not to get injured this past season, but get hurt later in the first year and become a bust." Okay, that is a very interesting question. He says, NFL, then if not to get injured the past season, but later. So is it better for him to get hurt now and recover now? Yes. I mean, clearly. Listen, people don't, if he'd ever got hurt, he would have been the number 1 pick in the draft. Like, I'm not even joking around. And people have brought up the reason why is because if you look at his tape, he's done it longer than Joe did it. So, and he's done it not at a higher level, but because Joe did it at such a high level that 1 year. But dude, he's been doing it for a long time, man. And he's such a good player. And if it wasn't for the injury history, and I know that's like saying, well, if you didn't have, space, then there would be no stars. So it's kind of stupid to say that, but, I don't know, man. I like Tua a lot. I don't think, we've had play, and I've literally brought this up before. Drew Brees went to New Orleans when everybody thought his career was over, and he did well. Deshaun Watson tore his ACL twice before he went to the NFL, and then tore it again in the NFL, and look at where Deshaun Watson is. Let me say that again so people can understand. Deshaun Watson tore his ACL twice before he went to the NFL, and then tore it again in the NFL, and look where Deshaun Watson is. Adrian Peterson had knee problems in college, okay, and look at him in the NFL. Nick Chubb had severe issues with his knees in Georgia, and look where Nick Chubb is now. Okay, none of that we've seen it. We've seen it. What are the examples where you take I'm talking a supremely talented player from college, okay, who's had a bad injury history, where it's completely ruined their career in the NFL. There is only a few examples of that happening. Okay, I would say. In the last 10 years, it doesn't exist. There hasn't been one. Maybe people retiring. The middle linebacker for the 49ers, Chris Borland, I think is his name, or whatever his name was. He retired because of concussions. But other than that, everybody else had a decently long career and then retired. So I don't know. I feel like the examples against it are slim to none, and the examples for it, they're especially recently. There are too many to be like, what are we afraid of? What are we actually afraid of? Usually when busts happen, it's because they can't play. Like Jake Long, he's I guess a good example, but we still got 5 years of Jake Long before he kind of broke apart. So, I don't know. I just feel like I don't see they're in the history of the league. There are very little examples of that happening. Like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, which I think was his name, legit, for the Dolphins running back in the 80s. He was going to have a great career. That was in the 80s. Our medicine has evolved a great deal. So you can't bring stuff up from that long ago because it doesn't fit in today's world. So, I mean, there's very little examples of that in my opinion. This next question comes from Russell. Russell says, I really think Miami not only should, but will do this. My prediction for the 2020 draft in Miami trades up for Joe Burrow. What do you think, Skaggs? I'm fine with that if they do that. This next question comes from Hunter. Hunter says, do you think Dan Marino would let Tua wear 13? I don't think the fans would like that. Maybe they would. And maybe that's what you need to be like, man, this is meant to be. And I've said that before because he's worth it. This is meant to be. This next question comes from Julian. Julian says, also, should the Dolphins give X another shot? If you're talking about Xavier, I mean, we don't know if he's guilty, so I think the Dolphins will. I think you're going to see Xavier play. Now, if he's going to play all 16 games, that's another, I don't know. This next question comes from SM. He says, everyone talks about Tua not having a full career, 12 years or more. But if you look at the current NFL quarterback situation, that's fine. Case in point, Dallas Cowboys quarterback Dak Prescott is a really good quarterback, but is he worth $35 million a year? I don't think so. So what is going to start happening is teams will grab their quarterback in the first round, get that fifth-year option, then franchise him in the 6th and maybe 7th, then move on after that. Is that a tough deal, but absolutely crucial to keep a competitive team on the field? Thoughts? No, that's not how teams work. There's no way. If you had a franchise quarterback, you're gonna keep, especially if he's like Dan Marino, you're not gonna get rid of him in his 7th year. That would be insane. And I know that's just the price you have to pay, man, for quarterbacks. Now, it's been done before where, I mean, Tom Brady's a perfect example of that, and I know that's a unique situation. It's a very unique situation. I think that's more of an exception to the rule, not the rule. So I guess that's not a good example to bring up. But it's been done before, like Brett Favre. I guess that's not a good example either. I don't think it hampers your ability to win championships, though. I mean, Peyton did it, and he was getting paid a ton of money, and they still were able to find pieces around him. That's probably the best example is the way the Colts handled Peyton. They still paid him a ton of money. He was getting a lot of the cap space. And they still, years after he was drafted, obviously they finally get a win in Miami against Chicago, and they almost get a win against New Orleans, in Miami as well. So yeah, I mean, there's examples against that for that. But it's just, you can't get rid of a franchise quarterback in his 7th season, especially if he's at top 10 level. You can't do that. And it's so hard to find quarterbacks. It's just not something you can do. If you're a good organization, you can find ways to keep it going. So I'm gonna say no to that one. So that is gonna be it, guys, for this week's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed. It's been a fun one to make, especially with the outside linebackers. It's just a lot of interesting scenarios and situations that this team finds themselves in, and we'll see what ultimately ends up happening. But I'm Skaggs1383. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you guys think about the outside linebackers in this year's class, and I will see you guys in the next one. And then listen, the whole Tua thing, we're all just going to, I swear, we all get, I mean, some people like the Tua situation, some people don't. I'm gonna be really, I cannot wait. If the Dolphins do get Joe Burrow, I can't wait to see what the reaction is to that. I think most of the fans would love to have Tua. If we made a poll, I think most of them would want Tua, but I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Because it seems like on this channel that more fans don't than do. I don't know. But anyway, and give me some examples of people, I'm talking to the last 10 years. 10 years. At skill positions or at quarterback that have had an injury history in college. And I've already given you one in Deshaun Watson where it's clearly worked out. That it hasn't. Because it doesn't exist. Now, RG3 is different. RG3 literally went up to his owner and said, I don't want to run this scheme anymore because I'm a real quarterback. I'm a pocket passer. And they switched it, and it didn't work. And ever since then, he hasn't been the same player. So that has nothing to do with injuries. But anyway, I'm Skaggs1383, and I will see you guys in the next one. I'll see you guys in next week's episode. I don't know, we gotta be going in the next one and stuff. But anyway, I'll see you guys in the next one.